Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tokenizecast. That's a podcast we do organize here that's focused on emerging technologies and that we think that shape our future, particularly those regarding blockchain and Web 3.0 and tokenization and their effect on enterprise applications. I'm Rich Napoli, retired CEO of Relevance and your guest host today. And I'm joined by a wonderful guest, Dale Chrystie, who is a business fellow and blockchain strategist at FedEx. And he's also the chairman of the Blockchain Transport Alliance. So welcome to the show, Dale, and thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. Dale, you and I have been in the business world a while, and we were around before, blockchain ever existed. So, maybe we can just give us a little bit of your story sort of in the transportation industry and how you first got interested in blockchain.
Yeah, again, I appreciate the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I am a business fellow and blockchain strategist for FedEx. I've been in the transportation industry my entire career. My brain kind of connects dots, so I found myself over the years kind of I was a corporate auditor for a while, policies and procedures, and then kind of in a fix-it role, process improvement and quality and strategy and a number of other things. And in 2017, I was at one of the FedEx operating companies, and I led the first blockchain use case at FedEx at that point in time. And then by 2018, I had kind of moved into this full time. And but originally, our very first use case was essentially trying to solve a quality issue. We were having a loss and damage issue, mostly loss in this example. Where a receiver would order something, a shipper would fulfill it and give it to us. We'd give it back to the receiver. And then several weeks later, we were all kind of arguing over how much was delivered. And ultimately, there were a ton of chargebacks, millions and millions of dollars of chargebacks, a couple of million for us on an annualized basis, and maybe 25 million or so for the shipper on an annualized basis. So not insignificant money at all. And ultimately, what we discovered is that we were simply talking past each other. So the receiver ordered on a purchase order, the shipper fulfilled it and gave us a bill of lading to move that. I was on the heavy freight side, so these would be pallets, in other words, and not just packages or cartons or something like that. Okay. So at the pallet level, they would give us a bill of lading, we would deliver it, and we picked up and delivered everything we thought was fine. And ultimately, there were discrepancies. There were gaps in the process. And it took a long time, and ultimately that was an interesting use case, and it's still interesting today. But the real aha moment for me in terms of blockchain was the peer-to-peer side of things, which is at a global company like FedEx, if you and I, supply and demand, right now are separated by multiple steps, right? We have, a broker, a forwarder, brother-in-law. I know some lady. There's all these people that sit between you and me on a supply and demand basis. Yes. And in a peer-to-peer world, can possibly, as this continues to mature, if you and I can find each other and do so in a trusted environment, we may no longer need all of those people that sit between us currently. That was the real aha moment for me initially.
Interesting. Yeah, that is. And one of the major sort of promises of blockchain and Web 3.0 is that, that general reduction in the need for a middleman to line up two interested parties, sort of like Uber does today. But that's interesting that it got to this point. Now, when you and I spoke a few weeks ago, just previewing all this, you kind of laid out a larger vision for how you think, transportation companies and even in general commerce companies need to collaborate or could collaborate with something on a grander scale. And I love the analogy you gave us with the International Space Station. So you want to take us through that, because I think our audience would love to hear that vision, and then we can talk about how we realize that vision. But lay it out for us first of what you think that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I spent my entire career in essentially a domestic U.S. or North American market, the LTL market, less than truckload. So those are pallets and all those kinds of things. And in the blockchain discussion, I really started focusing more at the all-up FedEx level. And at the, and we in early 2017, mid 2017, and then kind of 2018, we realized, wow, what we need to do is build a global supply chain blockchain. And we did, and it worked. And so what we realized we didn't go into it thinking this, but what we realized after it was built and after we looked at that is that it simply wouldn't scale. So if you and I and three other
scale
people,
in what sense, though, Dale? I didn't ask you that last time. Scale in what sense? And technical sense or a business sense, or
at a global level. So as I'm now really kind of realizing the magnitude of the company that I work for, after a career of focusing essentially on North America, we go to 220 countries and territories. And at that level, that's where I get to that visual of the International Space Station. So when I do a conference now, the first slide is this slide from space. And it's like, I'm just going to take all of you with me. I'm going to try to take a few of you with me here for the next 15 or 20 or whatever the minutes are in the conference, and look at it from this angle, because this is the FedEx level view. 220 countries and territories. We go everywhere you can go in the world. And at that level, there is no company, there is no industry, and there are no borders. Data knows no geographic borders. So when we talk about scaling, what scales, we're talking about it at the 220 country and territory level. It's going to have to scale, not just for you and me. You can't create it and slap a logo on it and charge people to do it, nor can I. It might work for a small industry. It might work for, maybe a US healthcare industry or an industry that's much more defined, where you could get 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 people to sign a document and say, hey, we're all going to do this. But at the global commerce level, it won't scale, because at that level, it has to work for FedEx or UPS or DHL or others. And it also has to work for a bicycle delivery company who does not have an IT department. And so when we talk about scaling in global commerce, it literally is at that level, at that view, it's going to have to work for everyone. And so that's not really, we didn't really think that's where we were going. But once we realized that, yes, you can build the technology, but culturally, from a commerce point of view, it has to go down this more of a fork in the road. Then we quickly realized, look, if you could hang an open source license on the threshold of this kind of global virtual conference room, if you will, if you could put the world into a big conference room and make people come through the door and say, stop and read this open license, this Apache license or MIT license. And if you're okay with the wording, come on in, it could scale globally. And so we didn't start that way. We started going down the path that a lot of other people were doing in 2017. Very quickly, we realized it simply won't, it won't work for an entity our size. What would, under what set of circumstances might it work? That's where we got to, we think open is inevitable. And we've been talking about that since publicly since about 2019. Wow.
And so what are you, specifically, what's your role in that? What's FedEx's role in that? I mean, because you're talking about involving, you said DHL and UPS and other guys, and maybe the U.S. Customs people and all that kind of stuff. How do you move that big amount forward? That's a lot of collaboration that seems to be required there. Is FedEx going to be taking a lead role in that, and what's next? I guess is what I'm trying to understand there.
Yeah, I would say how do you move it slowly at a glacial pace, right? I mean, it's a massive discussion. It's maybe one of the biggest discussions we've ever had, right? I mean, shy of solving world hunger and those kinds of broader discussions, but from a commerce point of view, it's a really big discussion, because we've really only had one global technology, and that was the internet. And it was actually, the standards were created at that point by a really small number of scientists and engineers who came up with TCP/IP and HTTP and these human readable, Dale.com instead of some series of numbers from that point of view. Yeah. Here we have this technology that's already out there, and here we are trying to get everybody to kind of agree on how might it work. And so it is a huge conversation, but within FedEx, we would acknowledge humbly that we cast a big shadow. We realize how big of a shadow we cast, and it is a global shadow. And so the conversations, as far back as 2019 have been with, World Customs and World Trade and US Customs and others from that point of view. And that's the way, I mean, you can't knock on doors around the world basically and say, hey, will you work with us on this? That won't scale either, right? You've got to work with the people that are the key players from that point of view. Sure. And I would also say a critical piece of this is that FedEx is one of only 3 members of a trade association called the Global Express Association. FedEx, DHL, and UPS. Those are the only 3 members of that trade association. There's a U.S. version of that, but this one, the global version of that, again, it's the same 3 members. And as far back as early 2019, we sat on stage together in Toronto with another very well-known blockchain global thought leader, Don Tapscott, and we all calmly just sat there and said, look, we all think this is going to be open. We think we're going to have to work together to do it. It's not about where we compete. So the word that I use, and we talked about this in the last call, is coopetition. It's not about where we compete. It's about where we can agree. So we certainly know where we compete with our primary competitors globally, but where can we agree gets us to a much more interesting conversation. And it's not an antitrust or an anti-competitive conversation. It's a pro-competitive conversation. So where we compete, we all know it's a hard line in the sand. There are laws. Everybody follows those very carefully. But where can we agree gets us to a number of things. We could agree on things like safety. We could agree on all kinds of things. One of the other areas where we can agree is where we can reduce friction across borders. That would be paper, that would be resources, that would be delays. Where we can reduce friction across borders, we win, our customers win, and global trade also wins. And we saw that play itself out during the pandemic. Most people don't care much about the global supply chain for their entire lives, no matter how old they are, until the pandemic, when they couldn't get a roll of paper towels that they needed, right? Or whatever, or other examples from that point of view. Right. And so we have been working with U.S. Customs and Department of Homeland Security and World Customs and others as well in this broad conversation. And by the way, U.S. Customs and Department of Homeland Security absolutely get it. They've got a 21st century framework that's on their website. They are very, very bright, brilliant people, and they're moving this thing forward. They're kind of agnostic to blockchain at this point in time. They're okay with blockchain or not. It doesn't matter. They're not going to dig their heels in, but it has to be interoperable, which we agree with. And actually where we think this is going to go is more self-sovereign identity. So verifiable credentials and things like that. You are who you say you are, and you can prove that. So am I. So it's been a very interesting conversation and a truly global conversation, and that conversation continues.
Excellent. So help me understand, though. So you have these global players like DHL, UPS, and yourselves, FedEx. There's lots of potential for cooperation there. But at some point, somebody's going to have to put up some real money to make this happen. If I'm on the DHL board or on the UPS board, I'm going to be like, well, what's in it for us? Why should we be giving this money to do? Oh, we're going to have to create a collaboration entity. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Like I came out of the finance industry, and the finance industry, the securities market created DTC as a commonly owned and funded clearinghouse for basically, it's like electronic trade, electronic shipments of stocks and bonds, right? So similar concept to yours, and they did agree to collaborate because they all saw advantages to reducing their equivalent of chargebacks, things like that in the finance industry. Are you looking to do the same thing in the transportation industry to create some kind of third party organization that's funded by all these guys, or how's it going to get built?
Well, in a peer-to-peer scenario, certainly we have just discussed already that we think that's going to potentially be disruptive for middlemen. So creating a middleman role to do that doesn't make a lot of sense. That being said, we've been saying since maybe early 2019 that we really think it's going to take one possible route would be to create an open commerce foundation, like a Linux foundation, something like that. Yep. Where there are, as I would say, with all due respect, adults in the room that are looking at this for the broad global applications here that works for the largest and the smallest of entities to truly enable and to truly streamline global commerce. So, you've got, we've been saying that public open blockchains are inevitable. That's where that's the only way it will scale. There are many other notable people that are saying the same type of thing. And but that being said, there's a fantastic open dev world, open developer world through GitHub and through other areas from that point of view, and lots of great examples where
Sure.
if a small number of really large entities could come out and say, look, here's reference implementation and reference architecture that gets us going,
Yeah.
point A to point B, comma, across a border would be a really fantastic start. You might add sensors to it at some point, IoT sensors. We think that's going to be foundational moving forward. If you could create some reference architecture for that and put it out into the open world and let the open dev, the brilliance of open developers and that whole concept iterate on that, we think that could be one path toward that. And again, certainly you need some original guidance and you need a little bit of governance from that point of view, but it's not about building a system that you're going to sell to everybody or that you're going to sell as a service or something like that. That we do not believe that will scale. And so the trick will become, how do you get some like-minded people to work on that and to do that? And I know we're going to talk about this as well, but just to take it one step further, we are also founding members of the Blockchain and Transport Alliance as of late 2017. UPS is also a founding member of that. And
you're the chairman, all right?
I'm the chairman of that. We just merged a few months ago with the Global Blockchain Business Council. And our focus is to be the global harmonizer for open data standards. And there is a lot of fantastic work being done in the world, right, in standards. Some of it overlaps. There are gaps. Some are open, some are not. We believe that the future of this is open data standards, open source royalty-free data standards. And so an example of that would be as far back as 2019, World Customs had standards, but they were proprietary standards. And Global Express Association, we worked with World Customs. Recently, they opened those standards up, and now the world can simply get to those standards. So part of what we're working on right now is literally through the Global Blockchain Business Council, they have an effort called Global Standards Mapping Initiative, GSMI. And we're working on 4.0, the fourth version of that. And for the first time, supply chain has a seat at that table. And we're deep diving into what code, what country code, what other things look at. And that is used by, that's an ISO code, that's a UN CFAC code, that's a World Customs code. There's a lot of this that's out there, and we're trying to bring all this together to the benefit of all, for everyone. It ought to be an open data standard. Once we get that as a foundational level within this global commerce piece, now we can truly accelerate into these emerging technologies, blockchain and beyond.
Yeah, no, that's always a key part for any type of collaboration like that. You have to agree on what are you going to call something, how, and what are the various numbers and how they all realign. Same thing in the securities market. You would be surprised at how many different ways you can identify a single stock by different numbers and different coding schemes, depending upon where the stock, which exchange it's listed on, and things like that. So similar problem set, and absolutely open standards is the way to go. And you do need some governance there. And I think you talked about maybe an open foundation there that can help kind of guide and steer that, because sometimes good, noble-minded people can kind of veer off, and so you kind of keep them heading in the right direction. And I think it sounds like you're going to do that. You mentioned data. I want to pivot onto that. Maybe that's where you're going, but you can have open data standards, but the bigger question sometimes with all these, especially in the competition environment, is like, who owns the data, right? How am I going to be sure that my data is my data and you're not going to have access to it? So what do you think how are we going to handle that?
My short answer would be that you own your own data.
Okay.
So I can tell you between 2017 and 2023, I think most of us in 2017 were really focused more on the technology of that, which is, okay, well, if this is peer-to-peer and I am a creator, I'm a musician or a photographer or a journalist, and I can actually own my own data, and if there is money to be made from that, royalties, then it comes back to me, or my own health information or my own financial information. And if you get to kind of that bigger concept and you think, okay, well, if that's all on a blockchain and I get up from this room and I go to the next room, does all my data move with me to the next room? It didn't take long for us all to say, wait a second, that simply won't work. We can't, it's not feasible to put everything on a blockchain. That led us to things like side chains and on-chain, off-chain. And so And then you also throw in, really important discussions like the EU privacy laws, right? So
I'm going to go with that.
GDPR,
Yeah.
right, the right to be forgotten. So if you have the right to be forgotten, if you have the right to be forgotten, and B, I've put your data on a blockchain, how do you solve for that one?
Yeah.
The answer is you don't, right? However, under some set of circumstances, you could create an anonymized link of something and put that onto the blockchain. And then if you want to be forgotten, you could sever that link. Again, I'm not on the technology side, I'm on the business and strategy side. So I defer to all the brilliant technologists that I work with and I've met. And I look to them to nod and say, can you solve this? Yes, we think we can solve this. Then I'm great. I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to get in the way to do that. But the answer is, I believe your data is still going to be behind your firewall. And you're going to expose it via API or via other methods, only what you need to expose from that point of view. And I kind of said another way, if you had to expose, if anybody listening to this had to expose their data, they simply wouldn't do it, right? So it simply won't work if the requirement is, first of all, you need to expose all your data. Nope. That's a non-starter from the start, right? And so it's not a matter of I'm going to fold my arms and say, well, I'm just never going to do that. Well, let's define the business rules, right? If one of the business rules is, first of all, you don't have to share your data. Okay, well, now what are the next rules and the next rules? And those are the kinds of rules that are going to have to be in place for this to scale. And yet, of all the very bright technical people I've talked to, they still will nod and say, we still think we can solve this. And great. Then it's got to work for me. It's got to work for you. I don't need, from our point of view, I don't need your intellectual property. I don't need your pricing, your margins. I don't need any of that stuff. I'm going to move your package for you, right? And I have certain information about that right now, but that's just several pieces of what would be an entire stack of data. And I don't want nor need any of the rest of that data. You would expose that to somebody who bought it from you. You'd have certain data you would expose to them. You'd have certain shipping data that you'd expose to me or to U.S. Customs, et cetera, et cetera. But these technologies, blockchain and beyond, are going to allow us to parse that, to control that, and say, look, I can ship it with FedEx, but I don't have to tell them this, and I can do. We'll be able to manage through that. That we believe we'll be able to manage through that.
Okay. Yeah. And the data standards you're talking about would be just to define those few pieces of information you do need to share. Like, where's it going? Where's it coming from? What's in it? How much is away? And all that kind of stuff. But
it's a very technical. The piece that we're working on right now with Global Blockchain Business Council for their Global Standards Mapping Initiative is literally defining what is a global supply chain. Most people don't even know that, right? And that's okay. Most people didn't care about that until the pandemic, right? And then all of a sudden, why can't I get my stuff, right? And why can't? And now that pandemic is more under control. Why can't I still get it? It's a really complex. It's millions of entities, right? And so the common data elements, there are. You could probably get as high as hundreds. You could also probably boil it down to maybe a top 50 that would get you a long way, and that gets you to country of origin and buyer, seller, receiver. There's some key data elements. You probably add a few invoicing elements, but you would certainly add customs elements as well, because that's a common item. For centuries and centuries, we go back in terms of some of that stuff. And yet it's all started from, clay tablets and papyrus and wood and all these things. And then it moved to paper. And that's still the single biggest barrier at the moment is paper.
Really?
The future of this, if we look at a child today, a newborn today, growing up as an adult, I believe that will be a significantly more paperless environment. And then commerce can move at the speed of data, not necessarily just the speed of the product itself, right? So if you and I can let customs know from a data exchange, an API or some other example ahead of time that it's coming from you, then they can clear that. You're a trusted shipper at that point. They know you, they know exactly who you are. Keep it moving, don't slow it down. And when you expand that concept globally, it's a completely different global commerce scenario at that point in time. And the very first thing that that FedEx, UPS, and DHL agreed on in 2019. We actually worked on, created, and published a paper to World Customs and World Trade that basically said, look, we need to work together on this, on open standards and interoperable pieces and things like that, as I said, where we can reduce friction across borders. So that goes back to 2019, when we all just calmly sat there and worked our way through that, and then provided it to them as a call to action. So again, we're trying to walk the talk, basically, from that point of view, and that continues.
Yeah. So I want to come back to this vision again of this co-opetition at a grand scale, with open standards and so on. Contrast that with some of the other earlier attempts of blockchain and Web 3.0, like some of the sort of the walled-in garden approaches that says this is going to be just things like IBM had done. They're going to be just for a certain industry, a certain group of vendors, private permissioned type stuff, and obviously those have had some challenges. So what do you think, why did they have challenges? What was the limitation there for them?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot to kind of unpack on that one. First of all, web, the first iteration of the web 1 was basically read only. Web 2, the one we're currently in right now, is kind of read write. So that got you to Facebook and Google and a bunch of other things where we're interacting with it, right, from that point of view, but we're also interacting with it through essentially a middleman, right? Something that sits between supply and demand. Web 3 is going to be read, write, own. So you will own your own, photography, if that's the case, rather than me simply going out online and right-clicking an image and copying it and sticking it in something without giving you any royalties or any context or credit for it from that point of view. And so I think a big piece of this is moving Web 2 companies into Web 3. And so I think the default position for a lot of companies right now is Web 2. We are a middleman. This is our business model. We're gonna lean into that, whether they realize that is a disruption to them moving forward, or just a strategic effort on their part to kind of lean into that. So we've seen a lot of companies move into that. Hey, we think you need we think everybody needs a blockchain, and we're willing to build it for you. And so there's a lot of that going on. We came out early on. I mean, I say early, 2018 maybe, that we just didn't think that private or permissioned or any of that would scale. Again, it might scale for a smaller industry. It might scale for a small company. It might, and there are examples of that. Again, my understanding, I haven't talked with them recently, but my understanding is that Walmart, who's been an early leader in this, especially in the food safety space, has, what I've read publicly, they have a private blockchain in the leafy green area, for example. So and I applaud them, and we applaud them because we all want food safety, right? That makes great sense as a citizen. So the people that they work directly with are on that blockchain, and the people that supply those people are also on that blockchain. So I mean, the early use case of Walmart and mangoes was a fantastic use case, probably back in 2016 or early 2017 or something like that, where they took a box of sliced mangoes and they said, stop everything, treat this like a live fire drill, go figure out where this came from as fast as you can. And again, I'm relying on memory here, and it's been a while since I thought of this, but it took them maybe 5 or 6 or so days to go back and figure out the source of that. And yet when they put it onto a blockchain, it was essentially like a search function where it just took a second or two, right, to figure out where that is. And we still haven't reached that point in the country, right? So from a food point of view, that's really important. But some of the examples that we've now seen of private blockchains honestly have kind of happened kind of like we thought they would, which is why we came up originally with the concept that we really felt that open was inevitable. Because if you and I can find each other in a trusted environment, then we may not need that middleman. And a lot of those early scenarios involved a middleman, right? Well, we think you need to do this, or we need to force you onto this to do certain things. And we really never felt that was scalable in the first place. And so, we all come up with opinions and thoughts, and then they play it out, right? Were we correct or were we incorrect? And in this case, we happen to be correct, at least from what we've seen so far. But there's some other very bright people. EY is a leader in this space. Paul Brody has been a very vocal leader for a long time. And every word you read from him tells you the same thing that I've been saying, which is open is where this is going, and it has to go down that path. So again, we haven't changed our opinion for a number of years at this point. This is global technology. This is not easy. This is not, I did a research paper recently for Blockchain Research Institute, which is co-opetition in global commerce. And I went back and went deep into this to find out the origins. I didn't create the word co-opetition. It was actually used for the first time back in the early 1900s. But we have examples of that in railroad back in the early 1800s, where they had to work through track width, right? Railroad track width, right? Because I might have had a private railroad that gets me from the ocean up a few miles, and you might have had a private one, but we had to ultimately say, well, can they connect?
Wow. Yeah,
and so little things like that, that we take for granted now, but that's co-opetition, right? And that happened all the way across Europe and across the US and all that stuff. And then we saw the same thing with air and auto. You don't want two planes landing on the same runway at the same time, and many examples like that. Yeah. But it's the second global technology that we've ever had. The first one, I already mentioned, that was the internet, and a really small number of smart people worked through the standards. Here we are with a fantastic transformative technology, and yet we still don't have those kinds of standards that would allow us to come together to say, wait, let's work together on this, because once we can get that built, everybody can add a proprietary layer on top of it. The problem is, early on, people simply want to treat it like the internet and just jump to the proprietary layer. Let's you and I make some money. Let's sign non-disclosures. Let's make some money and let's go get rich and then do this, whatever the case may be. And we realized early on, it's that foundational piece that has to be built first. Once it's built, all kinds of things are possible. And it's fair. I think I have to say as well, we've long since reached the point, probably multiple years ago, where whether or not the promise of blockchain coming to all the things that we have thought about, I don't think matters anymore, because it's completely changed the way we think of things. Once you think of the concept of peer-to-peer technology or smart contracts or other types of things like that, then I don't care whether that's blockchain or other types of things. It is already changing the way we think and the way we design, and these emerging technologies will take us there. Final comment, that being said, we still believe we need a foundational layer of standards and a common language as a foundation, so that blockchain and these other emerging technologies we can truly see a paperless supply chain. We can truly see things moving at the speed of data and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful vision. I think you're right. It's an undeniable future. It's the only way it's going to work. There's a lot of the technology challenge is almost the least of the problems here.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Political challenges and legal challenges and cultural challenges and language challenges. All those need to be accommodated as well. So I guess the good news.
I'm sorry, before you get to, let me follow that point, because it's an important point that I've learned, and I was wrong on this one 5 years ago, and I've had to learn. I'm an idealist, and I've been kind of beaten into submission on this point, which is just because there is a future that includes these kinds of technologies, Web3 and beyond, from that point of view, we all need to be realistic, which is to say that just because that exists doesn't mean that everybody wants it, right? So there's this whole gravitational pull. I refer to this as Web 2 versus Web 3. I can get a Web 2 person only so far in many cases before they snap back to Web 2. Their systems, their incentives, their annual reviews, they're putting their kids through school. This is what we do. I don't want to. What do you mean? Why would I want to jump to that? So that's it. Again, to your point, it's not only the technology piece. There's a lot of cultural stuff around this as well, and that's one of the reasons. Why is it taking so long, Dale? Because a good piece of the world doesn't want it to happen, right? I mean, it's very transparent in terms of things, coming in via U.S. customs or something like that. There's probably countries in the world that don't want that level of transparency. There's players in global commerce that don't want that level of transparency. There's a number of things. It's not just the technology. It's all this other stuff. So once you brought it up, I just wanted to finish the point. But that's a really important part of this whole journey.
Yeah, and really, that's why it's going to take folks like yourself to, be able to sift through all that and guide the rest of the people forward and let them see that it's, even though it's for the global good, it's also in their own self-interest as well, and that there's value in it for them. And that's usually what gets people on board when they, they can talk about these grand ideas, but until you show how it helps them personally or professionally in their business, then they don't buy into it. But it sounds like you're well on the way to that. And I want to thank you. We're sort of at the end of our time here, Dale, but I appreciate great insights, great vision. I wish you the best in all this. And of course, if we can be of any help in that, let me know. But sounds like you got job security, at least for the next few years. It'll take a while to get through all this. So, but thanks again for being on the show, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
Thank you so much. It was my honor.
Take care, Dale. Bye-bye. All right. I think we'll just stop here. I mean, they'll cut it off here. But thanks, Dale. That was great. It was, pretty much what we talked about early on, but it was great. It was great to hear you articulate it again in a more defined fashion than we were just chatting the last time. So I think these guys will take this stuff, they'll edit it down, and then put it on the podcast, and we'll get you a link, and you can pass it around on your network. I'll pass it around on my network, and yeah, as you go forward, keep us up to date. What's going on? Because it sounds exciting. It sounds really heavy lifting, but exciting. And
it's heavy. It definitely hurts the brain from that point of view. Can we talk football for a second?
You saw that?
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I grew up in Kansas City, so I'm a lifelong Chiefs fan. So I can tell you, I was actually riding my bike yesterday with a guy that I just met, and he's a Carolina Panthers fan. He spent the last few years in Charlotte, and I said, what you probably don't know, the guy yesterday, what you probably don't know is a true Chiefs fan has been following them for years, and we've been losing most of the years. So we truly expect to lose every game, and we're kind of surprised when we don't. So it's been a good few years, but deep down, when it was 17-0, it was like, okay, whatever. And then when it's 20-20, it's like, yep, here we go. Yeah. So I don't have any desire I don't have any desire to rub that in last night. I actually think your team, I think that will be the springboard for your season last night. I really do. So. And by the way, I think that the difference between the Chiefs and the Jets last night is the Chiefs turn into a machine when they get into close games, and they know how to win close games. They know how to control the clock, and they know how to do those kinds of things and all that kind of stuff. And that was literally the only difference. A game like that, you can lose instantly, right? Another interception or whatever the case may be. But I was really happy for your Jets, because
me too.
You guys have been taking a lot of crap from a lot of people on a season, right? With Rodgers going down, and now this guy, even Joe Namath, get him out of order. He played well last night. He played very well. And the team rallied. It's a really strong defense. You've got a lot of talent on the offense. Yeah. And I think that's actually going to be a springboard for your season.
I hope so. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we've been, I didn't realize the Chiefs were suffering fans for many years as well. We've been suffering since
most of my life. Yeah. Yeah. Most of my life up until the last 4 or 5 years. But yeah, most of my life is just like,
and that's where we are too. And, in fact, when I got to 2020, actually when with about 5 minutes to go, when Mahomes broke through it for 3rd and 22 and got a first down, I was like, oh, all right, I got my hopes up a little bit, and then I said, okay, this will play out. There's a tagline if you go to a Jets game, and as you walk out after they lose, everyone in the parking lot's going, same old Jets, same old Jets. It's like nothing's changed in 50 years.
But I don't think last night was the same old Jets.
No, it was not. It was not. But I mean, that's the way.
I think they showed themselves really well last night to a national audience.
Impressed. A very complete. I mean, other than the first quarter, very complete. Both. I mean, they've always been strong in defense, and they really shut Mahomes down. I thought. I mean, he only scored 6 points since the first quarter. So it was a very effective defense. the offense really, I mean, Zach was just like, I don't know where he came from. I mean, I saw something in him when he won that first game after Aaron Rodgers went down. I saw a sparkle in his eye when the game was over. And it's like, there may be something there, and my kids, my whole family are Jets fans, and they're like, no. And then last night they're like, gee, maybe you're right, because he really came alive.
Well, I mean, it sounded like, and I haven't followed the Jets that much. I mean, I'm a sports fan, so I follow them at a high level, but not at a team level. And some of the comments they were making on the telecast last night were that they basically have kind of opened the offense up for him. In other words, they had all the preseason, they had all the other stuff focused on Aaron Rodgers, and now it's not Aaron Rodgers, and it's not like he's coming back from a sprained ankle. He's going to be out for a while, and they finally adjusted the offense, and it opened up for him. And I think he showed a lot. He dropped in 2 or 3 just perfect passes.
Yeah.
So the guy can throw the ball. Right.
He can run. He ran for a scramble for a touchdown. So yeah, he's got the footwork. He's got the arm work. He just, as the guy was saying last night, that whole, offense. What do you call it now? Okay, it wasn't the name for it, but the West Coast offense. It was just something new for Zach, a different cadence and so on. And really, he needed to make it his own and adapt to it. And by the second quarter, he kind of took off, and it was great. So I have high hopes for him. I hope we can do something. Just make the playoffs. I'd love to make the playoffs for once. We haven't done that since 2011 or something. So it'd be great to be back in the. At least it's funny. It's nice to be back in the conversation again. Of teams that are doing well. So, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, and you see Mahomes. And Mahomes has all the headlines, and he doesn't need any more headlines. But last night was one of those games where you can really see who he really is, what kind of a competitor he really is. He lofted a couple of bad throws. They got picked off. Those were on him, and he knew it. And yet, 3rd and 20, I think, was the play before that. And he got 20 yards, and there was a penalty, or 3rd and long. It must have been 15 or 17 or something like that. And they had a penalty, which took him to 3rd and 22, and he got that.
Yeah.
And then he's scrambling, he's running down, he's kneeling down on the 1 yard line. I mean, that's when you see this guy's he's willing his way to figure out how to keep that ball and to drive that clock from 7 minutes down to nothing. And that's what they did. And like I said, that's the difference when I see the Chiefs. And it's not very satisfying for fans because we're all just like, oh no, oh my God, right? The Jets are going to get it. They're going to drive down the field. But that's when you see how well coached of a team that is. They just did what they needed to do when they needed to do it. And, I'm happy to have that conversation today. But in the moment, it's like, oh, geez, here we go again.
But he's such a pro. I mean, even on his worst night, that was not a good night for him. He finds a way to win. I mean, that's the mark of a champion. That because some days you're great, you're on fire, everything's working. It's on the days when you're not on fire. How do you win a game? And he proved that he can do that. So I give him a lot of credit.
I offered the topic as a compliment to you because I really think that's going to be a springboard for the Jets season. So. I think, and I'll top it off with that 2-point conversion. That was all him. It was all your quarterback, all your young guy. And it's going to be interesting, by the way, every time he has a game like that, I think Rodgers is going to work harder to get back sooner. And then you guys are going to have an interesting quarterback discussion because Rodgers is 40, right? And you're going to have him for a little bit. And then once you get this guy in a rhythm and moving forward, it won't take long for either them to have to make a shot. Because once you give him 6 or 8 or 10 games, and now he's in a true rhythm, and now you bench him because the other guy comes back.
Yeah, he won't do that.
That'll be interesting to see how that plays itself out.
Yeah, right? They won't do that. And, I think, in fact, that when he went down, I said, this may be the best thing for the Jets because you have the wisdom and counsel of Aaron Rodgers still there, but you have some, young minds and legs to take it and run with it. And I think, in some ways, his contribution to the team is going to be to shape Zach Wilson, not replace him. So we'll see. Hopefully it's
well, we'll see if he agrees with that. He's a pretty competitive guy too, right? They're paying him a lot of money. Anyway, I enjoyed it, but again, congratulations. I know it was there's no moral victories, wow, that was a good loss kind of a thing. It was a loss, But I was very happy for you and your team because you guys have been taking a lot of press heat about what's going on, and even Joe Namath and all the rest of this stuff. And I got to tell you, they came together and they played a heck of a game.
They did.
And there were a lot of bright spots. The defense was tough. They were all over the place. They were stunting. They were doing all kinds of stuff from that point of view. And the quarterback had the game of his career so far.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely the game of his career. Best game I've seen him play. He's always had moments of brilliance, but it was, clouded by.
He got into a rhythm last night.
Got into a rhythm, and I was very proud of him. So, we'll see. We'll see again. Time will tell.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Dale. Take care, man.
Take care.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye.